On today's show, Darrell and I are going to dive into the strategy piece of the strategic advantage baseball process. Hey guys, welcome back to Strategic Baseball Podcast. Today, Darrell and I are going to break down the strategy piece of the strategic advantage baseball process. So Geoff and Darrell here, and we help baseball players get to the next level with a strategic advantage so that they can play with supreme confidence against the best players at any level. In every episode, we promise to deliver value on the strategic side of player development to help your players compete with players just as good, if not better than them. Remember, Darrell's a pitching strategist, I'm a hitting strategist, and this is Strategic Baseball Podcast. If you are interested in joining our circle, head over to strategic-baseball.com, which you can find in the show notes, and submit your email to always get a reminder each time we release a new episode. Weekly tip from Darrell and I, and a PDF transcription and visual of the previous episode, and much more. If you are a player, a parent, or a coach who is interested in learning more about the strategic advantage baseball process and how it works for your unique situation, please email me at jeff@athletic-mission.com or darrell@dc@startpitching.com. You can find that both in the show notes, and we would love to arrange a time to speak with you and see how we can help. All right, Darrell, so we're going to dive into the strategy piece of the strategic advantage baseball process. I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away.
Awesome, man. And this has been a great conversation this week as we've been going through the last few shows, because I think people now, hopefully they're having that aha moment a little bit about that. Yeah, man, we can be stuck in what you and I call this compare and convince mindset. Well, we're just super focused on measurables. We're focused on, what is being judged and evaluated. And a lot of times it don't correlate with game day success. And it seems like the kids that are having game day success kind of understand the process a little better than the ones that are just hyper focused on their physical capability. And so today, man, we're going to continue to talk about that bridge from competitive advantage to mastery, which we really focused on the individual baseball skills of that player, where they're currently at. And every year they go through this. Every year they're going to have an off season that if they want to work and train, they can. Then they're going to have a preseason that's going to kind of give them the opportunity to kind of get back in baseball shape and really start focusing on what they individually need to do specifically to go play in a game. And how do we master a skill set that we're going to use that season? And again, mastery is not perfection. Mastery is just something that player has confidence that they can go do in a real game and do it consistently in a real game. That don't mean that they're always going to get the outcome. That's baseball. We don't get to dictate the outcome a lot of times, but we can control the piece that we're in charge of. And I think that's kind of the new baseball reality that we live in. When we see the difference between off-season training, how these guys are taking it into preseason, and then literally once the season starts, how are we taking it to a real opponent? How are we using it against a real opponent? And that's kind of what we're going to break down today. When we start talking about strategy, it really is changing from what you talked about last show. The you piece of it is what we call the true mental piece. The mental piece is about you. It's the way you think, feel, believe, and trust in your baseball skill set as a baseball player. And then once we get into strategy, it's really about your opponent. It's about the individual players, the individual hitters or pitchers you're going to be facing, and what do you know about them, and what kind of impact does that have on game day? What kind of intentionality does that manifest itself as you show up on game day? And I think this is the piece that's missing, Geoff. This is the piece that you and I always talk about with our guys, is that we can't skip the strategy part, because that's the easiest thing to do, especially in the world now of tournament ball and travel ball that's playing games all the time and not practicing very much. Then we can skip this strategy part, because they'll show up at a tournament with, 32 teams in it, and they have no idea who they're playing against. And so the little things that we start breaking down. And so when they get to that piece of it, let me back up a second. When they get to that tournament and they have all these different teams and many of them that they haven't really faced or seen before, then guys are asking, how do I have a strategy against somebody like that? And that's where you and I started breaking it down with them, like, the 15 cues and clues of how to read and study a hitter. See, there's things that you can do even in the moment that when we start breaking down the tendencies, the patterns, habits, and tendencies of all hitters, there's some commonalities about baseball that's going to happen. And then there's some individual skills, the individual talent and capability and what that individual player has mastered that kind of separates them as a baseball player. And I think a lot of times in that compare and convince mindset, we get caught up into the stuff that is common about baseball players, the measurables, the things that are they're like the visual things that we can see. But when it comes down to strategy, and for pitchers, I always tell them, man, baseball is nothing more than what your decision-making process is, that when you're standing on the rubber and you're looking in and getting that sign from the catcher, is what is your thought in your mind is the absolute best pitch that you have mastered that you could throw in this situation and count. And so when we start talking about that, all of a sudden you see them get quiet. You see them start thinking through their head. And now all of a sudden we've transferred from mastery, what I've done, the you piece of it, as you call it, we talked about, into the him part of the hitter part, the pitcher part of it. How do I specifically look at one player and say, okay, this is how I'm going to attack them, or this is going to be my approach against them? And see, that's something we got to train these guys to do. You got to have that strategic advantage mindset, is what we call it. You got to have that. And sometimes you don't have a pregame scouting report on a team. So you're going to have to go watch batting practice if you can. You're going to have to go watch them guys warm up. You're going to have to be able to kind of get an idea based on what that team has done if they played games before. If you can pull up stats now, there's so many different different organizations out there now. A lot of them track stats. They track different things that, again, it isn't perfect, but it will give you some cues and clues to what these hitters like to do, how aggressive they are. And if you go watch them play earlier in the tournament, if it's not the first game of the tournament, then you can get a lot of ideas of what they do the first time through the order. Does that coach like to be patient early in the games and not let his pitcher or his hitters be aggressive on the first pitch? Are they trying to run up pitch counts on pitchers? And see, you can learn that just watching games within that tournament itself. And those little cues and clues as a coach can help you get an idea of how aggressive you want your pitchers to be in the first two or three, the first time through the order. And so there's all kinds of little nuances and parts of the game, Geoff, that we can teach these guys to look for. And I think, man, honestly, that's been the coolest thing over the last few months of these guys down here at Athletic Mission grasping that concept. And then when they come in during the week and we're doing these post-game evaluations and walking through like what happened literally, then the conversation is not just good, it was okay, or then, no, man, these guys are breaking down at bats. They're breaking down, how they faced this hitter. And they're breaking it down pitch by pitch by pitch and literally giving us a play-by-play, of what they were thinking. And, man, see, that's the part that I think we're seeing the most growth with, because now it's not that we try to tell our guys not to think out there. We want them thinking. We just want them strategically thinking. We don't want them focused in the game on the you part of it. That's the piece that has to be kind of left behind. They can't be out there questioning their ability to swing. They can't be out there questioning their ability to throw that pitch. They got to be out there looking strategically, what is the absolute best pitch I could throw in this situation to count? And when you take that mindset, that is what strategy is. Strategy is not this magic word that's out there. It's just each individual player having a process that they got an idea of what this guy is going to try to do to me. And then they got a plan literally of if that happens, I'm going to swing, or if that happens, I'm going to throw this pitch in this location. And when you kind of look at the game like that, literally one pitch at a time and one at bat at a time and one inning at a time, then it does give these guys a chance to slow the game down and really focus on strategy, because it gives them permission not to be focused on the you part, their physical capability, their skill set, and really focus on just playing the game, man. And I think that's the cool part about it, that when we start introducing the concept of strategy and that strategic advantage mindset, and that everything we do has got to give us a strategic advantage, or at least we got to believe it does anyway. And that's where confidence comes from. And you and I are always preaching to these guys. And I've had a coach ask me one time, a great question. He said, Darrell, do you think you can teach competitiveness? I said, I can, to a guy that believes he's got a mastered skill set and has a strategy, because that's where competition happens. Competition don't happen when I can just physically dominate somebody because they're not very good. But when you start playing against guys that are just as good or better than you, that are planning and game planning against you, and then you can go out there and compete pitch to pitch or bat to bat, then that's baseball, man. That's what truly makes you a great baseball player. And I think that's why guys are grasping this concept of having a strategic advantage mindset. Now it kind of lets me get out of this compare and convince mindset and really move into what you and I call this compete and contribute mindset. Now it's about me competing and how do I help my team win the game. And ultimately, man, I think that's what every player wants. I think that's what parents and coaches want. It's just go compete, man, and let's see what happens. Let's play the game.
Yeah, for sure, man. And you know, like I said a couple episodes ago, that was the biggest thing that I learned from you 5-6 years ago was, man, we got to have a strategy. We got to get ready for them. So yeah, that was big. But hey, man, something that you said that I want to bring back up is, you know, this understanding that individual player development is a year-round process, and it goes through this same cycle year after year. And that's the strategic advantage baseball process. And maybe we need to do a show on this, you know, but there's the preseason, in-season, and off-season. And the different season takes us through a different part of the strategic advantage baseball process. You know, because I think too many guys are focusing on the wrong stuff at the wrong time, which is kind of confusing these kids and in some cases frustrating them because they're not getting the game day results because they're working on the wrong stuff. And again, it's not their fault. They're following what they know and what they've been told, but other coaches need to do a better job, which is why you and I created this strategic advantage baseball process, you know, which changes the focus throughout the entire year. So anyway, let's get back to the strategy on the hitting side. And we try to get guys to understand that, hey, listen, your strategy is based off what you have mastered. And then it's based off what you know about that pitcher and about that team that we're getting ready to face. And so the information is just information. But the more relevant information you can gather, the more you gain a strategic advantage over your opponent. And so, you know, what's the information based off of? The information based off any previous understanding that you have of that pitcher, of that coach, of that program, and then what you're seeing in real time in a baseball game. You know, so how to watch a baseball game. You and I talked about this. This is something that has to be taught. Guys need example. They need a starting point. And that's when you and I came up with that 15 clues and cues. So, you know, things like, hey, is the guy tipping his pitches? Can he command that off speed? What does he do when there's a runner on second? What does he do when he falls behind? Things like that, you know, taking in information to help you. And we just call this, you know, it's simply just paying attention and watching baseball. It's not much more than that. And we don't want to overcomplicate this, but the good players are constantly trying to find a strategic advantage because you know what, man, hitting's hard. But remember, the thing we have to remember too is like your strategy and your approach in baseball, it's based off of what you've mastered. There's no generic strategy. And so, yeah, I mean, man, Darrell, I think we need to get this conversation going, and we need to get more people talking about the strategy side of stuff and using time wisely. You know, right now in Tulsa, Oklahoma, it's pouring down rain, and our high school guys are playing. You know, for some programs, they're sitting on their phone playing games because the coaches can't get them out on the field. I don't know, man, it's crazy, but hopefully we can help start this conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome because when they understand that we're nothing more than patterns, habits, and tendencies as players, man, and we develop that through that competitive advantage, there is kind of this paradox that happens, man, is that we train and we train and we train to create repetition and create it. But within that repetition, every player I've ever met, including me when I played, we have our own nuances, our own habits and tendencies. And a lot of times guys don't pay no mind to it because they think that's what every pitcher does. But the truth of it is, when you start looking for these little cues and clues that would just give you a little hint or tip, or how you watch a pitcher throw, or the rhythm and tempo, do you see them change their leg lift with their pitches? Do you see them set up a little different? It's more than just generically, are they tipping? It's really showing you whether that is a habit or whether it's something that they just started that day. And even as coaches, if you're evaluating your players, you got to understand their individual patterns, habits, and tendencies, man. These guys are not robots. And they're not video games. We can't sit in the dugout and just call pitches like we're playing a video game. You got to see what's happening in real time. You got to understand what these kids have mastered, and then really, do they have the conviction to throw that pitch in that situation and count, even though you think it's the best pitch for them to throw. And again, this is another show for another day. We've had this conversation about game calling, pitch calling, the mindset of pitch calling, kind of what is the intent. And again, man, I'm not trying to hate on anybody for doing it because I've seen both sides of it now. There's some pitchers that don't want to call their own pitches. But I think the reason that is that a lot of these kids don't have a strategy, man. They don't understand that their mastered pitches is something that they have to be able to go and create a strategy to use those against any hitter they face, or any, vice versa, when a pitcher and hitter. So when we see that mindset, man, that's the piece that kind of changes the game for these players. And you and I tell them all the time, man, once you get the strategy part, once you have a strategic advantage mindset, baseball's not boring anymore. And so that's usually how I can tell if somebody's got one. If you was going to say, hey, can you tell me in 5 seconds whether somebody's got one or not? I'll ask them, man, do you really think baseball's boring? And if they say yes, then I'll say why. And most of the time it goes back to, well, they don't hit enough home runs, or they don't strike out enough guys, and they don't have no idea how they hit a home run, or what was the strategy that let them see that pitch, that let them be on time to hit that home run, or vice versa, how to execute that pitch that got that ugly swing and miss strikeout. And when they don't have that next step, or they don't take it a little bit deeper, then that's usually the surface level guys that as soon as the kids start leveling up and playing against guys that are better than them, that's when we kind of see them fade off and quit playing. And that's why you and I have really put an emphasis on teaching this to younger players, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, and they can do that. Do they grasp it all? Nobody ever grasps it all. There's always new data, facts, stats, and something that we can use. But if they grasp the fact that on game day they need a strategy, and they focus more on executing their strategy than worrying about what skills they don't have mastered or what velocity they don't have, then they really do have more success on game day, because it's really about the game. It's not about their physical capability anymore. That just becomes a prerequisite, man. And that's a mindset shift that you and I really hyper focus on here, man. How do we go from that compare and convince to that compete and contribute to this strategic advantage mindset? And when we see those players that go through those three transformations, have that mindset shift from comparing myself to everybody else to wanting to compete, to now it's about a strategic advantage, man. It's really about me just playing on game day. That's when we see guys blow up and take off and have a ton of success, man.
Absolutely. And you know what, as we wrap the thing up, watching a baseball game, and really trying to understand the opposing coaches and what they're teaching and what they preach. So other coaches have to understand that, and make sure that our players understand that, if I'm a guy And I like all my hitters to take strike one. And the other team knows this. And the pitcher grew the ninth ball right down the middle with zero fear. Now we're behind the count. Now we're getting, a little tense, a little upset, which could, kind of affect our at bat. If I'm a, hashtag no ground ball guy and elevate to celebrate type of guy, swing hard, and the other team knows this, there's going to be a lot of balls starting in the zone and working out. So I think we just have to understand as coaches, how our philosophy and what we're trying to do, it's either going to hurt our hitters, help our hitters, frustrate them, just understand what we're doing and how it's going to impact the baseball game. And I get certain philosophies and there's a reason why you do them, and that's fine. Just understand, just try to understand all that part, especially when you got a team that has a strategy against you. And they're gonna find a way to win because they figured you out. But anyway, we just need to understand that, and whether we're hurting or helping our guys.
And I think sometimes, Geoff, I think sometimes, to wrap this up, sometimes what you just said is just a little cue. It's just something little. We don't have to have this deep psychoanalyzing and that goes into understand. Sometimes it's just a little thing that you see this guy do that gives you a clue of what he's about to do. And that's the only advantage you need to barrel up that pitch or to execute the pitch and get that swing and miss. And so a lot of times we don't have to make it more complicated than it really is. It's really about that self-awareness about the little things, and then really paying attention to the different patterns, habits, and tendencies that guys have, because most of the time we tell people what we're going to do, but most players don't pay no mind to it.
Right. So Darrell, that would probably be your takeaway. And that's something that, we've been trying to kind of hammer home is what is the biggest takeaway that we want our guys to the people that are listening to have from these conversations. So, and I think we've got to do that the last show. So anyways, what's the biggest takeaway that you want our listeners to get from what we're talking about right here, right now?
Yeah, I think we just touched on it a little bit, that, hey, strategy don't have to be this deep psychoanalyzing thing. It needs to be more about you trusting what you're capable of. And then what do you see from your opponent? What do you see from that hitter that you can attack, and not making it any more complicated than that? And then it's a fluid thing, man. It's something that changes pitch to pitch. And we talk about it all the time. When I talk about the 5 things I want pitchers to do after they throw a pitch is, was it the right pitch for that situation and count? The second thing was it the right location for that situation and count? And then the third piece is, was it the right strategy for that hitter? And then the fourth thing is, did that hitter make an adjustment? See, good hitters will make adjustments, sometimes pitch to pitch. And then the last thing is, the only time I'll give an excuse is, okay, was it the right pitch? Was all of those things all right and good? And the umpire just missed the call. And if he did, you just got him, okay, he missed the call. He's human. He's part of the game. Next pitch. And then we start that decision-making process all over again. Okay, now it's 1-0. What am I going to do to this guy? What is his tendency on 1-0? Is he super aggressive in his hot zone? Can I show a pitch in his hot zone and move it out? And that's kind of the mindset that we want these guys to have. So again, understand that a strategic advantage don't have to be, some crazy amount of data and statistics. It just needs to be, you understand what that hitter is trying to do to you, and you got a pretty good idea how to use your pitches to get him.
Yeah, for sure. And the takeaway for me is just trying to make sure that we understand that your strategy is based off what you have mastered. For us on the hitting side, that's why we work on the stick process for the swing and the command hitting process for hitting. And then it's based off what you know about your opponent and what you know about that individual pitcher. So it's not generic. That's the biggest thing I wanted to hammer away. All right, guys. Well, thank you all for kind of tuning in. And, like always, if you guys find any value in these episodes, please leave us an objective review and then head over to strategic-baseball.com and join our circle. We got some cool stuff we're working on. I keep saying that every episode, but we will start sharing them here pretty soon. Thank you all for listening in, and then we will catch you in the next episode.